Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with award-winning singer, songwriter, author, mental health and disability advocate Heather Hutchison. Blind since birth, music has been a huge part of her world from a young age. Growing up in Edmonton, Alberta, she spent much time in her early years making up melodies and figuring out songs by ear on the piano. She has had struggles with mental health and was hospitalized for psychiatric care during the COVID-19 pandemic. That's the subject of her book. She has a great story. Enjoy this interview.
So you're an award-winning singer, songwriter, best-selling author, mental health and disability advocate. The last 2 years of COVID and what we went through probably, I would imagine, would have been pretty hard, seems like you're pretty active. So how did that time period change you?
Yeah, it was challenging for sure. As a musician, it was actually, in a way, a positive for me because I wasn't performing right before COVID. I had kind of taken some time off because I was struggling in other ways, and I was kind of just, it wasn't really the music that I was playing, what I was doing wasn't really fulfilling me. So it was actually nice to get that time during COVID to really kind of figure out where I wanted to go with music and what I wanted to do. Personally, it was a really challenging time. I ended up being hospitalized for psychiatric care back at the beginning of COVID, and then I ended up writing a book about that experience, so kind of took some time off there from music as well. And then finally, after the book came out, I was like, well, I'm a musician. I have to translate these experiences into songs. It just makes sense. So I actually came out with an EP called If I Could in January of this year that basically is sort of the soundtrack to that book and talks about those experiences of growing up as a blind person in Canada and Latin America and then being hospitalized for psychiatric care at the beginning of COVID-19.
Well, art has a way of healing all of this, and obviously during this pandemic, the fact that we did have music and art and TV and film was huge for humanity, because if we didn't, it would have been really bad. So my question to you in light of that is, being able to take those rough experiences of COVID and translating that to art, do you feel as though maybe that was one of the biggest healing obstacles or healing parts for you?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. Back at the beginning of the pandemic, I felt like I was so far gone that I couldn't even enjoy music. So music had always been such a healing part of my life from a young age. My first album came out when I was 16, and I was already struggling quite a bit by then. But I would play these concerts and things, and people would come up to me afterwards and be like, oh, this song really resonated with me. It really helped me when I was going through this challenging time. So for me, music has always been about connection, about humanity, about finding that human connection with other people. So really struggling and not having that during the beginning of COVID was hard. But then as I started to get a little bit better and I started to get back into music, and open myself back up to that power of music to heal, I think it was, the defining factor really in my healing process, in getting better and being able to release music again.
So with all of these things that you are and that you do with your life, if someone was to run into you and say, hey, what do you do for a living? What is it? What would your answer be to them?
That's a tough one. I feel like I do so many different things. I think I would say an advocate, because in my music I try to advocate, in the work I do with mental health I try to advocate. So yeah, really focusing in on that advocacy, that human connection again of helping people and making that connection and helping people to feel like their experience isn't just their experience, but whatever they're going through, they aren't going through it alone.
A really good saxophonist, and he's come through. I'm here in Kansas City, and he's come through before, and he's partially blind, and I've interviewed him a few times, and he's explained to me, because of that, how he can conceptualize music on a stage and in a way that's totally different from others that have different faculties. So I'm curious, as somebody that's creative, how does that make what you do a little different from what maybe the rest of the world would experience as far as taking in art?
Yeah, I think it's true. I think everybody does take in art and make art in slightly different ways. Our brains all kind of work differently. For me, I think, not having that visual aspect, but in a way, music can be quite visual. The whole industry, I guess, making music videos and things like that. So I actually have to be kind of creatively visual, which is challenging. But in terms of the music, I've spent so much of my life having to memorize things that I think for me that gives an advantage if I'm trying to play by ear, or I can read Braille music. I'm not great at it, but I don't really, because either way I have to memorize it because I'm playing with my hands. I haven't learned to play music or read music with my feet yet. So, so just the memorization aspect, I think, is an advantage for me going through, even music school and things like that, and ear training. I think, there's definitely an advantage there. Not because my hearing and things like that are quote unquote better. I've just learned to use the other senses a lot more effectively over the years.
So talk to me about growing up. How did you get this inclination for art, writing and music? How did all of that begin for you?
I don't really remember a time when I wasn't, in some way involved in music. I remember, some of my first memories are I had this, really old, big Fisher-Price tape recorder, with the microphone and everything, and I would carry it everywhere and make up songs and things like that, and I would sit down at the piano, and even before taking lessons, I would, play what I was hearing on the radio by ear and things like that. I think by the time I got a karaoke machine for my 6th birthday, and by that point I think I kind of knew. I remember my brother offered to lend me $100 to record an album when I was 6, which if anybody's ever recorded an album, it's a little more expensive than that. But I got more serious about it in my early teens when I really had started to struggle, and I started taking songwriting more seriously. And then I was in a talent competition, the finals for a talent competition, and I met a producer who had been on the panel of judges for that competition. He came up to me backstage, and he was like, hey, I liked the song you played. Why don't we try recording some music? And I didn't really think it would happen, but 3 weeks later we were in the recording studio, which was pretty crazy to go from the high school band room to the professional recording studio in the space of 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's wild. So who have been musical influences for you? Who do you look up to? Who do you listen to that you really get into?
Growing up, it was a lot of the big pop stars. My mom would listen to Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston and all those. Then in my teens, when I started writing, it was probably Evanescence, then even some jazz artists as I got more into it, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, fantastic vocalist. Now it's a little bit of everything. I like City and Color, even some of the pop artists like Ava Max. I think right now she's a great vocalist. So it's really kind of all over the map.
Talk to me a little bit about what you enjoy the most about your daily routine. There's a myriad of things that you do, but kind of talk to me a little bit about a typical day for you and what brings you the most joy in your, whether it's writing or being an advocate or your music.
They're all so different that it would be hard to pick just one. I absolutely love being in the studio because I'm a perfectionist, and how many other opportunities do we get in life to erase our mistakes? So I really love that. I love the creative process. I love getting to work with other musicians and hearing their ideas. I just really love connecting with people also through advocacy, getting to hear other people's stories and how my story can intersect with them. I've been doing a lot of advocacy work on TikTok actually lately, so every day pretty much I'm creating at least one video which is interesting keeps me creative and things like that, and allows me to connect with a lot of different people. So it's also different, and I love that I get to do so many different things, because I think I would get bored just doing one of those things.
You know, my son, who is 17, is on the autism spectrum, and I've dealt with the disability community for a long, long time. And I'm curious, from your perspective in a different country, and how do you feel the outside world with empathy? Do you feel like it gets better all the time? More resources and more empathy, or a better dose of empathy for people? How do you think that's evolved over your life?
I think we're talking about it more, but I still don't think we're talking about it enough, and I don't know that we're talking about it in the right ways. I think there's still a lot of fear and discomfort around disability, and I think for the most part, you can't educate people who don't want to be educated, but I think a lot of people want to do better, and when they know better, they can do better, but it's just this lack of knowledge around what people with disabilities are capable of. I think that fear just comes from not understanding. So I think it's really important to be continuing those conversations. It really depends on the day. Some days I'm like, oh, it's totally getting better from when I was a kid, and then other days I see myself and other people, like especially younger people with disabilities, who are struggling in the same ways as I struggled when I was younger. And those days are really hard, because it's like, well, I don't know if it's getting that much better. So just, day by day, put one foot in front of the other, and I try to do what I can to educate people and to further that movement.
So who would you consider role models for you, those that have really inspired you to be who you are?
There's a lot of famous people, but I think the biggest role models are the people in my life who I've watched go through adversity and come out the other side, because I think, when you see people in the public eye, you're only seeing the one part. But it's really inspiring to me to see some of the people in my own life and how they've struggled and how they've helped me during my struggles. My first producer has been a huge role model for me, and we're still friends now. The producer I'm working with right now has come through a lot to be where he is. My partner has been so supportive of me during the past years while I've been struggling. So I think the people who most inspire me, who are my biggest role models, are actually the people who are closest to home for me.
If you could meet anybody alive today on the planet, who would it be? Who would you love to meet?
Maybe, I don't know, like musician-wise, maybe City and Color. I really admire him as a vocalist.
What's next for you? What are you looking forward to? What's on your horizon to do next? Kind of, especially in light of the fact that hopefully COVID's easing, things are opening up, we're getting into a better place on the planet. What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, here's hoping. I'm looking forward to recording more music. At first I was kind of not too big on the whole like single thing versus releasing albums. I'm starting to embrace that more. I think it's kind of cool to actually be able to put out music more frequently than just waiting, a year or two and putting out an album, because then there's always something fresh coming out. So that's really exciting, and it keeps the excitement and momentum going. So right now I'm writing a lot. I'm hoping to go back into the studio probably October, November, write some more material. I just had a single come out on last Friday. And in terms of live things, what I'm really hoping to do as we open up more is combine kind of the book and the music into almost this one sort of quote unquote performance, reaching people with the two different mediums. So sharing my story in a live setting through both story and music coming together into this one sort of performance to hopefully reach the widest audience possible, because some people respond better to music, some people want to hear, more of the story. I think with music, we can kind of fall into the trap, and it's a blessing and a curse of hiding behind metaphors. And when you're speaking and telling your story, you kind of have to be more straight up about it. So I think both are really important things to do for me, and I'm really looking forward to combining those two into one sort of show.
So for anybody out there that's listening to this that's curious about your book, what would you say to convince them to actually buy the book and read it?
I think there's something in there for most everybody. I think that no matter, wherever you come from, whatever walk of life, I think there's something, I've heard from so many different people in so many different situations that have found something that they relate to. So basically, if you're facing any sort of human struggle, I hope that you'll read it and that you will find something in it that encourages you to keep going.
So everyone out there has an interpretation of you. You have different circles. What's your interpretation of you?
Who do I think I am? I think a very flawed person who's trying to leave the world a little bit better than I found it in whatever ways I can.
Heather, where can people pick up the book, your music, learn anything more about you? How can they do that?
Yeah, they can visit my website, www.heather-hutchison.com, Hutchison. On there, there's links to all the places you can download and stream my music, my book. It's on there. It's available on Amazon, Audible, basically anywhere you get books as well. All my social media is there, my TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, etc. So it would be great to connect with anybody.
Wonderful. Heather, hey, thank you very much. Good luck with everything.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, and music around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.